welcome. I have to admit, it's 8:30 in the evening here, getting close to my bedtime, so I will not keep you for a long time. So I became interested in gifted education. When my child was she was about 5 or 6, and it was at that point I started to realise that teachers needed to do more. It's not just about academic needs, it's also about the emotional and well-being. And one of my colleagues was sitting in the staff room having a cup of coffee, having a lovely old chat, and she said, "Why don't we start our own school?" And I thought, yeah, why not? She said, "It's easy." It took us 4 years of a lot of hard work. And during that journey, I actually did an ethnography and captured all the events along the way. It probably took me another 5 years to write everything. So it took me a good 10 years to actually finish my thesis in and around gifted. But I think it's things like having a child who is gifted that I started to look at things completely different. So we wanted a school that was predominantly independent of government. It would be co-educational, and it be designed to not only provide academic, but it was around nurturing these children and looking at their social and emotional well-being. But there was, all through everything that we did, there were very robust debates. And because there was no school like it in Australia, we looked at what does the research say? What have other schools done, so that we could formulate our ideas. Some have worked, some haven't. And that's okay. How else do we learn? And that's how we've done a lot of development. So it was providing an environment that places students by ability in a safe environment where they can actually have fun, be challenged, that they can learn and actually grow. And we actually adopted a very predominant student-led approach to their learning, so that they had control of what they were doing in the classroom. So some of the questions that we asked was, how are we going to identify students? How do we know which students to allow in and which students to not? And that's probably been a continuing debate, probably the last 7 years and even the 5 years before. So we actually sat down and thought about and looked at multiple definitions of gifted. And the one that resonated with the teachers was Subotnick's definition, where it's about, we wanted to capture those students that were at the upper end of the distribution curve, and that it was their development and it was those beginnings and stages that we wanted to provide that education for. So how do we know which students they are? So that's when we actually looked at things like, do we do a test ourselves? And then we started to find that's very pragmatic. We listened to what other people said about how they allowed students into their school. We looked at schools in America. We looked at schools in Europe, schools in Australia that do gifted in the upper years in high school, but not primary, and found that it was going to be pragmatic. It was going to be a lot of hard work. So we actually started to turn our attention to things like having a psychology test, and through the psychology test, we could actually look at the scores and numbers. So it was those variables that we wanted to have a look at. and be able to cultivate and develop those children. So before I go much further, the basis of that identification, we find that a lot of people get confused between what's meant by a high achiever and what is a gifted. Now, I quite often use the analogy of the Bart Simpson and Lisa Simpson from The Simpsons. Bart is extremely disruptive. He likes to play pranks. He's distracted. He questions the teacher. He completely underachieves, but he has a very strong sense of social justice. But he learns things exceptionally fast, whereas Lisa is well behaved. She likes to play her saxophone. She's very focused and she studies continuously and has good grades. And as I point out to people, it's Bart Simpson who's the gifted child. The reasons why he's bored or disruptive, hey, he learned it the first time. He doesn't need to keep going over and over sequences. Whereas Lisa is really that high achiever, and she probably has a high average IQ. And then if you are really familiar with The Simpsons, he learns languages, gets on the airplane, has no understanding of Spanish. When he gets off the airplane 4 hours later, he completely is well versed in Spanish. So they're the two differences. And it was those gifted students that are naughty, that will question, that have a strong sense, are the students that we deal with on a daily basis. So that's it's wonderful to actually work with them and see them grow and develop. So with that identification, we look at their cognitive ability, and we look at the 97th percentile or higher, and we look at the general ability index or the full scale and non-verbal. And we like to look, if they don't have that overall high ability in the general ability, we look at the verbal, visual, or fluid, so that they have 2 of those. We found that they're the students that fit that gifted profile for us extremely well. And any of the following things like psychoeducational achievement tests, academic competitions, NAPLAN, which is the national standardised testing here in Australia, or we do ICAS competitions Australia wide. Quite often students have sat those and we have a look at those. So it's not just focusing on cognitive ability. We also look at academic achievement, and we also look at, does the child want to come here and be here and work with us? So we take in a broad overview of everything, not just one. And I think it was Gary Davis in one of his books, when he talks about identifying gifted children, you can see a yes and you can see a no when you've actually finished interviewing. It's those students that sit on the, I'm not sure, are they a yes or are they a no? He recommends that they should be a yes, because it's probably the creative child that we've got sitting in front of us. And that is the one thing I always remember when I'm actually looking at these students and reviewing those students. So all students have to provide a little bit of a portfolio of work. Parents come in for an interview, and we also interview the child, no matter how old they are. We just want to get to know them and find out more about them and their story. And some of those stories can be quite sad, because they've just had a really rough time at school and nobody gets them. Or, they've journeyed from overseas to come here, or interstate to come here, which is quite rewarding for us, because we're still in our infancy. We've only been going 7 years. I still think we have an awful lot to learn, but we're constantly reflecting, reevaluating, and renewing even the identification process. So that's constantly ongoing. As part of that identification, we look at the learner characteristics. Quite often I'll ask for a teacher questionnaire to give me more information about the child. We have those conversations in the interview, and then I get together with the panel after I've done all of this to have a more in-depth chat where we can actually talk it through and listen to everybody's beliefs about that. Is this a gifted child? Is this a child that we want? Do the parents fit our values? Does the child fit our values? Because a lot of energy goes into teaching these children. And, while I think about it, our classes are very small. They're, 15 to 17. So that we can work a lot more closer and one-on-one. It's about developing that holistic approach to the understanding. And at the same time, I'm probably passing on what I've learned to younger staff in this process. So they will ask questions of me, and I can answer those questions, or I can ask them questions. So even the team, it's instantly learning. I don't think a day doesn't go by where I found myself, just asking questions of teachers, students, or working with those students. So, and it's also, some students will be definitely gifted. And these students quite often are gifted and can have a disability. I've got students that are exceptionally highly gifted, with IQs over 150. They also have Asperger or appear on the autism spectrum. And they have another set of needs as well. So, and we also have what we call an adaptive educator that works with the teachers to give them greater understanding of the complexities of those children. But I think over the years, we've become very, very understanding of those children. It could be we've got children with dyslexia. I quite often see dyscalculia in some of our students. We have a few students that have really bad handwriting. But at the end of the day, they go, it's okay. I've got it all in my head. I just need to get it out and on paper or on a computer or on a whiteboard or somewhere so that we can see and understand what they need and how they want to show us that they're learning. And that's where that student-led constantly comes in. So we've actually used the Australian curriculum, and we've adapted it using the student-led and ability grouping to pull it all together. So it's quite an art, I think. If I was to draw it, it would be probably very convoluted, but that's okay. So I'll start with the ability grouping. So rather than have students in classes by age, or, someone said we could have put them in classes by their shoe size, or a whole range of different ways of grouping students. We actually decided to group them based on their ability. So if they're really good at maths, and I have students that are in Year 4 doing Year 8 maths, I have students in Year 5 doing Year 7 English. So they're not stagnant and they're not at the same level for everything. It could be up and down. So I've got some students that, Year 6 for everything and sitting in a Year 10 maths class, which is quite the norm. They get, quite used to negotiating whether they're going to accelerate to the next year level or not, what's missing, what do they need to learn, what are the understandings that are missing. We often talk about what are the gaps that we need to make sure that they have a clear understanding of before they move on. And in that understanding, we make sure that we check continuously where they're sitting in that learning, because learning doesn't, go in a nice level. It will go up and down depending on other facets of their life, whether they're sick or their parents, split up or they've had to move house. There are a lot of things that can have an impact on a child's learning. So it's also about being mindful that, we don't learn at a constant rate. It will flatten off. It can escalate. It can decrease. It's nice to sit down and just not learn for a little while and give your brain a break. And other times you want to give yourself a challenge. So it's actually supporting those child in that journey, and that there's no set time limit. You can accelerate at any point during the year and not have to wait to the end of the year is one of our very core principles. So when students first arrive, they may be across the board at the same level, but we do what we pre-test before we do each topic. So what does the child know about this particular topic? And if they know everything that there is to know about it, well, why would I teach it? Is always the question. Why can't they do something different? Why can't they negotiate doing something at another level, or joining another class, or looking at a different animal or species, or coming up with their own creation? And then we link all of this to the Australian curriculum. So it's not about content, it's about understanding and skills. And that's where our focus, have we given them the skills and the ability and their understanding to actually be able to progress through that work that they've got. So some of the classes can, like I said, students can be all over the place. Can be all over the place, I think is where I'm trying to go. The Australian curriculum and acceleration, students can be that asynchronous to development, and we need to be aware what our students are doing, and we need to be constantly mapping what they're doing and how they're doing it, and that we give them those opportunities. So all of our subjects, like the core subjects like your maths, your science, your English, your histories, they're all on at the same time, so that we can move those students, up and down as needed to accommodate. So on the next slide, I have an example of a timetable. So as you can see, this is a child very close to my heart. He's been with us for a very, very long time. He's doing year 11 maths. He's actually started a year 12 maths subject, so that he's working on that. But at the same time, he's doing year 9 English. He's actually only 12 years old. So we've allowed him to excel where he feels comfortable and where he needs support, such as the English. His English is amazing, but like he said, he doesn't feel comfortable and he doesn't feel ready to go to the next level yet. So we don't have a fundamental belief. It's not about pushing children. It's allowing children to get there as they need to, and that's where they feel comfortable. He does year 8 health and PE. And he also does year 9 digital technology, and all our students do art. Some of them do it on a Friday afternoon, some of them do it on a Wednesday. And the art was really important because it was about bringing in the creative part of the brain to actually look at things and solving problems in different and unique ways. So using art as a medium to allow them to express themselves has been, I think, really rewarding. We've also got on Wednesday afternoon, we actually did chess with the kids. And the reason why we do chess, all of our children all want to win. You know, so when you're playing chess, you've got a winner and you've got a loser, and every now and then you might have a draw, but it's about teaching them that you can lose and how to lose gracefully and how to win and be graceful about that. And it's also about communicating. So chess isn't just playing a game, it's more the communication, the social side, the well-being side. Their brains are on the go all the time. So having a break and playing a game of chess is really, really fantastic. Friday afternoons for the younger students in primary, they actually have a whole hour where they actually have what they call it tea time, which is more along team skills. So it's playing board games as a team or playing a game as a team. So it's not about the I, it's about how do I work with a group of people to achieve a particular function. Could be, like I said, a board game. It could be an activity that we've designed, so they actually have to, the only way to win the game is to actually get everybody else to the other side of the room as part of that team. Because the other thing we found with gifted children was there's very much, it was all about I. There wasn't any we in a lot of the statements. So it was about, once again, the social and emotional activities that we plan, and saying that social and emotional well-being is actually managed throughout the whole school on a constant basis. So we call it just in time. So when something happens in a classroom or at recess, or it's something happened on the weekend and students want to talk about it, we actually allow them to talk about how they could manage it differently, how they could manage it better. They might tell us how it worked for them. And it's about supporting the child in making, you know, good decisions and why those decisions are really important, but giving them a voice to allow them to explore what they need to explore. So I think that is really important. So each child's timetable will look completely different. No two children have the same timetable. So that's always quite interesting. And through that whole timetable, we actually look at constantly improvements and different pedagogies through everything that we do. So the personalised learning and that social and emotional consideration, you know, it could be in the form of enrichment, is just one of the avenues that we do. But the personalised education plan is we sit down and we look at their cognitive abilities, we look at their academic placements, we look at the areas that they're interested in. And as we know with children, interests can change weekly, daily, monthly, or they could be on the same path. I've got one child, you know, from the time he's been here for 4 years. It's trains. Everything is about trains, and he has not deviated. So I know what I need to do when I teach that child to make sure is to always include trains in whatever we do. We also, within those plans, support the students with disability and have diagnostic information in there and make sure that we are accommodating those needs. And it might be there are external services that they need to have access to, or it could be just different ways of learning within the classroom. Because each child is definitely unique. And their interests, like I said, are different. Their characteristics, their learning goals are all different. I have, a child that said, my learning goal is I'm going to read 100 books this term. And I thought, that's a bit high. Okay. But it's also about allowing them, that's the goal they set. And then you evaluate that goal. And I thought, this is going to be, quite easy at the end of the term, when I sit down and we talk about this 100 books. I was a bit shocked. He read 250 books. And he said he needed to set a bigger goal. And I said, well, maybe it's not about the reading of the books, but did we actually understand what we need and how could we quiz one another on the books? So then I was starting to read more and more genres outside of what I would normally read so that we could actually quiz one another along the way. No, I found some good authors. So I think he actually taught me a lot more than I taught him. But it is also about having reasonable goals. And he said maybe the goal was unreasonable because he said the look on my face was one of horror, but he was determined to do it to prove me wrong. So I thought, okay, so the goals over time actually changed for this particular student, and his goals were, very specific. They were very measurable. They were very thoughtful in what he wanted to achieve, which was part of that student-led planning. So on the next page, this is one of our personalised education plan template. Yeah. So as you can see, we include the psychological report, any reports from any health professionals, do they have any medical conditions? Do they require a healthcare plan? And we also will talk to external service providers, to see what else we can do to support them. We also ask the child about what are their interests and strengths, and knowing that they change, because that helps us with our planning. If I'm wanting to get a student to do a piece of work, I can actually incorporate and include some of that child's interest in getting some work done or designing the task with that child in mind when I'm, working through it. And then we have a section where we do all the accommodations and adjustments. So we're very specific in what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and people sign off. But in there, we also use the Australian curriculum, which covers the English, math, science, history, the arts, the languages, the technologies, and the health and physics. And at the bottom, we actually have something that we call a base grade. So that would be their grade based on their age. We do that so that we can actually map if they've got acceleration happening. Is it a year? Is it 2 years? So you could imagine what some of these documents could look like. We can have coloured dots all over the place, or we might just have, single clear dots all down one column, signifying the child is at year 5 for everything. So they can be quite scattered in some areas, but not in other areas. Yeah. Oh, excuse me. I'm just going to... So with the enrichment, we actually... It's within the classroom, so it's authentic problem solving. It could be... so problem solving, it could be inquiry based. We might use different kinds of pedagogies, like I've used, things like a raft activities or differentiation based on their interest. because of finding with gifted children, it's also about, improving their self-esteem, their self-concept, and it's also, in some areas, they really need to go a lot deeper and be more complex and have higher order thinking and using Bloom's taxonomy in which to build that overall classroom experience. So it's about that authentic approach to problem solving. So it's bringing in the Australian curriculum, what the student wants, their interests, thinking about the social and emotional well-being. It's about instilling confidence. It's knowing the characteristics of our children. It's about being quite respectful to that student-teacher relationship. And it's, once again, it goes back to that strong foundation. So that is a snapshot. There's probably, I could talk for hours and hours and hours